Hello, welcome to another episode of On the Floor with Wayne and Rob. I'm Wayne Highlander with Bone Adhesives.
I'm Rob Johnson with the Bona Training.
How we doing, Rob?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. So this episode is going to be kind of I'm not sure which way to go on this, but it involves an inspection. Okay, it involves engineered floors. It involves contracts. It involves a lot of different things. Okay.
Just one of those exciting episodes.
Yes, sir. So a really good contractor I know had an inspection done on a floor. Okay. And
Are we gonna disguise his voice? We're gonna have him on, disguise his voice.
no, not this guy.
I think from now on, that's what we should do. Everybody on there,
Just disguise their voice.
just disguise their voice, put them in the shadow.
Hmm.
Those
Yeah,
are my favorite interviews, I think, on
that,
TV.
that would have been a good idea. Have them on. Um,
Exactly.
I'm not mentioning any names. I'm not mentioning any states. Nowhere in America. Okay.
But you
So,
know, don't you?
well, yeah.
Yeah, you
So,
know.
so, an inspection was made on the floor. All right. Really good contractor, super good contractor, does excellent work. And the complaint was there was splits in the middle of the boards, like it was wide engineered flooring, wide plank, and I'm not talking about gaps between the boards. I'm talking about splitting on the surface of the board. Okay, that was a complaint. So I seen the report that the inspector did on the floor, and it was very interesting to me the road that this inspector went down. Okay, here's the he he called them citations. Is an interesting language.
Citations.
Yes. So first of all, let me talk about some of the things he omitted in his inspection. Now he was not an NWFA certified inspector, but he had all kinds of expert in everything type of inspector, right?
Hmm.
But when he got there, he omitted the relative humidity and the temperature in the home at that time. Okay, I'd say that's probably a pretty important.
That's a pretty big omission, don't you think?
You know what? You're talking about another man's livelihood and reputation. All right. So get your together. All right.
Yeah.
So he omitted that. He also omitted the type of finish that was on the floor. Now, when we're talking about splits in the floor, well, the type of finish is pretty darn important. That's on the floor. Okay. So he didn't
Hmm.
go into that whatsoever. Um, he also used, I'm not going to mention the name of the meter, but it was a surface meter. Okay. Now, adjacent to the floor was exposed concrete in the same room. He could have done an RH test. He could have done in situ probes, right? And,
Hmm.
and, and tested
Hmm.
it to get an accurate test, but he didn't, right?
Stab test.
Yeah. So he's saying that in some areas of the floor where there was concrete, it was elevated moisture. And he went down the road of it was elevated moisture in the subfloor. Now, and the inspector also during the report mentioned that there were no signs of cupping, no crowning, no delamination, no popping, no hollow spots, no dark boards, um, nothing from any indication of that moisture was coming from below the floor. Okay,
Right.
but he went heavily down that road, and he also said that the floor in their instructions, and this is why he said that the guy was wrong, is that the manufacturer's instructions say that it has to be less than 3 pounds and 75 RH to lay the floor. Where are you going to put that floor in America? You know what I mean? It also says that you have to be sure that it stays that same uh, moisture year round. How you going to know
Wait a
that?
minute. Wait. I'm writing notes down. The manufacturer said 3%.
3 pounds and 75 RH. Okay. Which according to the NWFA guidelines, that if you're below 3 pounds and 75 RH, you don't need any kind of moisture protection whatsoever. That slab is so dry, There are, no moisture concerns whatsoever. Now, be aware that that's for that particular period in time. Who knows what's going to happen down the road. But according to the inspector, you have to know what's going on down the road because otherwise you're not supposed to lay the floor. But if you do run across high moisture, you need to put down a two-part epoxy. Okay. Not seeing a lot of two-part epoxy these days, are you? Right? So on and on and on about the moisture in the slab, but there was no signs of moisture from below on the floor. Okay, that's like saying, well, you came to check the engine in your car, but you had the wrong tires on it. So hey, I don't know the engine. You know what I mean? It had nothing to do. It had nothing to do with what was going on with the floor. There can only be three things causing that to happen to the floor in my mind. One, you could say that, well, probably excess water on the floor when they're maintaining the floor. So improper maintenance, right? You could say that. In fact, the problems, causes, and cures, I think it's page 12 or whatever, talks about that. Okay. And also, it's interesting to me. He says he didn't know what type of finish was on the floor. He said some areas had elevated moisture in the subfloor. There's no signs of it coming from underneath. So, is it a possibility that it could be caused by, using too much moisture on the floor when you're cleaning it? Okay, it's a possibility. The second thing that can cause that, which more likely I think can cause that, is the lack of relative humidity. We sometimes, and this is the part of the other thing I want to bring up in this is that sometimes we put in engineered floors and we think they're bulletproof, right? That, put an engineered floor and you don't have to worry about much. You don't have to worry about acclimation so much. You don't have to worry about a lot of these things that you would have to worry about with solid wood floors because, man, these things are very stable. Where a solid floor might shrink between the boards, an engineered floor you might get the splitting on the face of the boards. Okay. So that could be the issue, that lack of relative humidity, when it goes down into the dry months, did that cause it? As a side note, you can go to Wonderground and you could look up the city that they live in. You could look up if it was 2012, you could look up 2012, where they put it in September 15th. Okay, look up September 15th, 2012. It will tell you what the weather conditions were that day, that week, that month, right? You can look up
Yes.
how much humidity was going on. You can look up if it was raining, what the high temperature, what the low temperature was, what the dew point was. All that's there. He didn't put that in his report, but um,
Well, the number one thing for split boards, the number one cause,
mhm.
he didn't have any documentation of. I throw this report out right away.
You talking about the RH at the time?
Yeah, high heat,
Yeah,
low humidity. That's the
yeah,
main cause of something like what's going on that job. High heat, low humidity, and this guy doesn't have any numbers. That
yeah,
so
yeah,
what are we basing it on?
yeah. There's a third thing that can cause that, and that can happen before the wood even gets to your house. That can happen at the mill, right? You can think,
Hmm.
you can. So that's a possibility. I've talked to wood scientists and say it was already in the wood floor, inherent in the wood floor, blah blah blah, and it didn't expose itself till later on. Now I know it's possible that when you dry the wood at the mill, maybe the surface of the wood is dry and the core is wet still, and you have tension in the board itself, or
Hmm.
and I think that's probably why manufacturers say you need to keep it between 30 and 50% RH in the house. That would probably help that somewhat, right? So what could the flooring guy have done though? We're talking about a real good floor guy. I mean, I would be honored to have him put the floors in my house, right? The guy's a stud. And he would say that, hey, I've worked in this territory for 30 years. I know the products I work with. I used a great adhesive. Thank you. I used great products. Um, I look out for my customers. We follow, best practice, and I would say all that's true. But if you don't have it documented, if you don't have it where you had the conversation of how to maintain the floors, because this all comes into play for an inspector. Did you know how to, how do you take care of the floors? Well, no one told me I had to take care of no one told me I had to use this or that or the other.
Hmm.
Well, no one told me that I had to keep the humidity at 30 to 50%. You know what I mean? No one told me those things. So while those things, you know, are certainly keeping the RH in the home is to me is the homeowner's responsibility. It's in my contract, right? I think uh, I'm just doing this podcast because don't take for granted it's an engineered floor and it's bulletproof and not going to have blah blah blah. And I don't need to tell my customer this because um, I'm doing what's best for them. I have great experience doing these things, and uh, you know, like this lady told me years and years and years ago, that stuck with me to this day, is handshakes are good for introductions. Anything after that, I want it in writing, right?
Hmm.
So that's why I think that almost having someone sign off on something, say, hey, what this is how you maintain the floors, this for your records, sign this or whatever, or some way of saying, check off that we had the discussion on how to maintain the floors, that the relative humidity needs to be between 30 and 50%. If it goes below that, this can happen, whatever. And to properly maintain the floors, don't use water, you need to use this, which I think this guy did all these things. You know what I mean? I think he had these
Mm.
conversations, but where is it documented? You know what I mean?
How long did it take for it to start to split? How long did they?
According to the oh, I'll tell you something else that happened too. Remind me about Ramboard. But it was several months afterwards they started to see it. Well, let's say you put
Okay.
the floor in September. I'm just throwing that a month, right? Let's say we get into January and February right now. If this lady's like my wife, who God knows we're always fighting over, we don't fight over nothing but except that thermostat. And she likes it very hot, and I like it cold. But so she turns the heat up and it dries out the room. And that one room where we watch TV in is the room that moves the most in my house. The rest of them really don't really move, but that one does. So let's say that you have that, and I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. Let's say you have that kind of consumer that really does that. You know what I mean? So it's not the installer's fault, but you just want to make sure that you've had these conversations, and if you have these conversations, somehow they're documented. So I think sometimes we take engineered floors for granted and think it's the end all be all. Um,
Do you
uh,
think
you
it could
know,
have been telegraphing?
I mean, it could have been. I don't know. Could have been. But before I go further, I want to say something else about his report. He also cited as a problem on the contractor's fault that according to their instructions, because right after the job was done, they put down Ramboard, okay, so to cover the floor. So the inspector put down that, well, you're supposed to use a breathable product when it says right here in our instructions. Well, if you look at Ramboard, the first thing it says on their product, which Ramboard's a great product, is that it's a breathable product. I mean, hell, we've all used Ramboard, right? It's one of the most commonly used products that cover the floors. So I don't know, man. And now the other thing too, if you're going to be an inspector, and by the way, like I said, this was not an NWFA certified inspector, but if you're going to call yourself an inspector, you don't measure the RH in the house or the temperature in the house. You had an opportunity with exposed concrete to do a real test, not just a surface meter on the test. Oh, and by the way, the homeowner told this guy, um, well, according to your instructions, I don't think you can't put this floor in anywhere. The inspector says, oh, I've been putting them in for 40 years and I've never had a problem. Wrong, wrong, man. And also the inspector also offered a solution to fix the floors, which was tear them out. So wrong. I mean, this guy,
This,
man, it makes me so mad. You know what I mean? As you got a hardworking guy who's a damn good floor guy, who's a really sensational floor guy, and you get a report like this, because now he looks to the homeowner, he looks like the expert, right? He's got all
Yeah,
these.
he's right. He's the
he's got
third party.
yeah, and he's got all these. He's got a fancy name. He's got all these certificates after his name. Consultant and blah blah blah, senior inspector, and all these different things that make you feel like, wow, he must be the man. Well, I mean, just looking at his inspection real quick, it didn't take me very long to go through it and just pick it apart. So, but to the consumer, wow, look, now you look like, oh, this expert told me that my floor guy did all these things wrong, and his report is wrong. So, so I guess there's several things I'm trying to say in this podcast. We're trying to say is that one, um, just because it's engineered floors, don't mean that you don't have to follow all the protocol that you really that the industry guidelines. You can have issues with them.
Don't
Um,
you think though? I mean, as long as we've been in the business, I've always seen a lot more issues with engineered floors than solid floors, where so many people up here in my neck of the woods go with engineered floors because they think, well, I won't have to worry about seasonal gaps and this and that. And no, there's a whole other, dry cupping issues, these split board issues. There's a whole other rash of stuff that can happen to the engineered where I don't know, it almost seems like they're a little more susceptible to this stuff than solid.
well, it certainly depends. I think it depends so much on where you live because I think that engineered floors can handle too much moisture better than they can handle not enough moisture. Like if you're up in the high desert areas of the country, certainly that's got to be a consideration, right? So knowing your area that you live, we talked about on the last podcast about even wood filling discussions is regional. You know what I mean? So hey, you could take the a great contractor in Michigan, like take a stud contractor in Michigan, move him down to Florida, and he will have to change the way he does things, and vice
Oh,
versa,
oh,
right?
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's because wood is a it's a product of nature, and it's a um, it's the environment is so in this inspection, it's really an environmental to me with the
Yeah.
outside
And now this was
possibility
this year,
of
right?
yes,
This whole thing was this year.
yes,
And I had mentioned this in the seminar, the to fill or not to fill seminar, that at least where I'm from up here in the Northeast, this could have been one of the driest seasons on record
hmm
because, and I'm just looking at my own floor and my own gaps. It was just incredible.
yeah,
And when I started talking about that, I had a bunch of people stand up and say, yeah, this by far was one of the driest seasons that we ever had. And, when you look at some of the issues that you can run into with the engineered floors, dry cupping, split boards, um, they're just so vulnerable to excessive heat and low humidity that, these are things that are going to happen. But this year was even, crazier than years in the past.
yeah. Um, document. No matter what, I think it's smart to have to have documentation on readings for your for the subfloor before you put the floor down. Um, we have flow as an unlimited moisture protection, but I still think, and I'd say this no matter what shirt I was wearing right now, no matter what manufacturer I was working for, I would tell you the same thing. I still think it's important to document only because of things like this. Because you know what I mean, you get an inspector with all these titles after him. Say, well, you didn't test. Well, my adhesive says I don't have to. Well, now you've got maybe you might win, maybe you won't win. You know what I mean? I just think
Right.
to cover yourself that it's just best to, and you certainly don't want to say you didn't test, right? So um just make sure you document as much as you possibly can to help yourself out. And because, like I said, you could be, and we've all seen it before. Anybody's ever is old enough to remember the O.J. Simpson trial. You can take a guy who's like supposed to be great at his job, been a police officer or whatever for 30 years, whatever, and then boom, boom, boom. Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? And he gets on trial. Looks like, oh, the guy he's so incompetent. It's crazy. You know what I mean? Because you didn't document it, you don't have this, you don't have that, and it's their job. Our job is in the field, right? We know floors. That's where our comfort zone is. An attorney's comfort zone is in that courtroom.
You
So
know, since you brought up OJ, how crazy is this that you got OJ in on split engineered floors and you get the OJ trial in there? But Pete Sherman, you know my buddy Pete, he still thinks that we should be out there looking for the real killer.
really,
Yeah, oh yeah, he knows that OJ didn't do it. He knows it for a fact.
okay, okay, yeah, out of his mind.
Yeah. And I'll never forget we were golfing with the Tremblay brothers. So it was me, Pete, and the Tremblay brothers. And we all teed off. We're walking down the first fairway and we're talking about OJ.
Mhm.
And Pete says, I don't know why we're wasting our time. We should be out there looking for the real killer. And we all started cracking up, like, yeah, that was pretty funny, you know.
Yeah,
And he got pissed. He was dead serious.
wow,
And I'm like, Come on, you
wow.
can't be." And he's like, no. He goes, it's always stuck with me that Pete thinks we should be out looking for the real OJ killer.
In my lifetime of you look at things of, and this was before all social media. So what has captivated the whole country? Um, that's got to be in the top five easily. I was in
Oh
the.
yeah,
I remember working out in the gym. Obviously, where else would I be at that time in my
where
twenties?
else would you have been
I
back
was
then?
getting ready to go to
Yeah,
disco, getting the
you and
arms
Arnold,
right.
right?
Yeah,
You and Arnold.
I was probably doing triceps on that day if I remember correctly. Um, and the whole world was watching that. So, yep. All right, what else can we?
I remember the real slow car chase and people on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
overhead bridges like free OJ.
That's
Yeah.
what that's what we were watching in the gym. The whole gym, everybody stopped working out, and we're watching that Bronco driving down the freeway. I think the 405 or the 5, whatever, and slow motion chase. Yep.
And for the real killer.
Mhm. All right.
Okay, Pete.
All right.
Yeah,
So
so engineered floors, yeah, people think that they're just buying the silver bullet, but you got to
and
be careful with them. And the other thing too is, the quality of the wood, the wear layer, the quality of the wood, just because it's engineered doesn't mean it's a quality engineered floor.
yeah, yeah, true. And so I'm not advocating, excuse me, for engineered or solid. I'm not taking a everything has its place, but I'm just saying that again, it goes back to your contracts as well. That if you had this in the contract, it wouldn't be a discussion right now. Here's how you here's how you maintain the floors. Because this person was using water and a mop to maintain the floor, okay,
Mm.
which can absolutely contribute to the issue on the job. Um, if you had a discussion about maintaining the if you had it written down, rather, not because I know he had the discussion, but if you had something in writing somewhere that here we talked about this, it's in the contract. You're responsible for maintaining the RH in the house and the temperature and everything. Um, these conversations are a whole lot easier, right? So,
Well,
uh,
the other thing too is look at how court cases are going now. I mean, people who commit crimes are suing the people that they committed the crime against because
they're very true.
you,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And
yeah,
judges are now like, well, I guess he makes a point. The guy,
yeah, yeah,
he shouldn't have left his door open. Well,
yeah,
oh, you got to be kidding me. I
yeah.
mean, it's so, if you get anything, and in the end too, I mean, this was, going back to my to Phil or not to Phil seminar.
Mhm.
And how many times have we talked about this on the show? Educate, 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 get it in writing, get contracts, you know, do your due diligence, as Wayne would say, on
Mhm.
making sure that you write down how to take care of the floor. when to clean it, how to clean it, walk off mats, because the the frivolous cases that are out there now.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you want, it's still going to cost you money for
Yeah.
lawyers and all that
That,
stuff. I mean, it's just, you know,
the,
it's insane.
and the thing is, you probably you got a lot going against you because you're the expert, right? Because they think, oh, the consumer didn't know, you're the expert that knew. So you're kind of like, no
Right.
matter what, you've got one leg in the fire before you go any further. And like I said, even if you're right, you have no idea where it's going to go. You know, you just don't know. And that stress in your life, man, you don't need it, man. It's hard being in business without having to come through this stuff. And like I said, this guy is a stud floor guy, man. He's a really, really good floor guy. And I know he does everything in the best interest of his clients. He always does. It's just this kind of guy he's always been. And no matter what, he's gonna, take care of everything. But, just interesting. And also just I'm mad about the report because I just think, you know, if you call yourself an inspector, you better be damn well be good enough to be an inspector and do your due diligence and do things the
Well,
right way.
you and I have both seen, I've seen guys come to the schools that, I've seen wood floor guys come to the school who are NWFA certified. Not, I think it used to be NOFMA certified too, wasn't it? NOFMA.
Back in the old days.
I think NOFMA had certified, and
Hmm.
you had to know your stuff when it came to wood floors and everything. Now I see a lot of inspectors, they're like carpet, tile, linoleum.
Well,
They're just general floor inspectors because
yeah,
I get lots of calls from those type of inspectors asking me questions about how long does it take to cure, what was covered, things
yeah,
like that. Your real wood floor inspector. And I'm not saying anything you know bad about any floor inspectors, but
yeah. I listen. I wouldn't want to be part of an industry that didn't have inspectors. Inspectors, you know what I mean? It didn't have standards, right? I mean,
right.
you obviously want to have standards, and I think guys are doing by and large they inspect themselves, right? I mean, if you want to know if you're doing work any good, just put a floor on Instagram.
Yeah,
Watch all the other floor guys pile on.
yeah.
Um,
Like I said, I've had some of those inspectors who inspect carpet, linoleum, everything, tile, whatever, come to schools just so they can gain more knowledge. Come to a 3-day sand and finish school. And it's funny because every time they come, they always point out to me, yeah, I'm not going to do too much. I'm just an inspector. And I'm
yeah,
like, oh,
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But a lot of them come to gain more
Mhm.
knowledge into, what's going on
Yeah.
with wood floors. So,
Well,
hey, my hat's off to those guys. They're looking to
yes,
always be educated.
it is my personal opinion that if you have not been behind a sander for at least 10 years, you shouldn't be inspecting sand and finish work. It's my opinion. So,
So behind a sander 10 years, that just reminded me. Yesterday was opening day for our golf league. Golf has got to be one of the most insane sports. I've been playing golf since high school.
mhm.
And at the start of every season, it's almost like I never picked up a club in my life.
I thought you've been getting
It,
lessons.
I was, yeah, and I booted the lessons. I didn't take any all winter, which I said I'll take one a month during the winter, stay sharp. Oh my, just unbelievable. Okay, just so bad. Anyways, we're walking out of the bar that we go to after, and I see this truck parked right behind me, like almost bumper to bumper behind me.
Mhm.
And I'm walking out with Pete. I go, look at this freaking moron. Look at how close this dude parked. And Pete goes, yeah, it's my new van.
Now, well played.
What a big, beautiful van Pete bought, right?
Mhm.
I go, that's yours, right? I'm like a little kid.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
swear, I'm like a little kid. Like, hey, let's go for a ride, right?
yeah.
It's the nicest van we've ever owned. But now,
Nice.
yeah, beautiful. And
Wait a
I
minute.
am like, what?
He's not doing floors anymore, I thought. He's retired.
No, he retired from the post office. He's
Oh,
still a
okay.
floor. He's still
Oh,
doing
okay.
floors.
He
We
retired from
never, you
something.
know that. You're
Yeah,
never going to stop.
yeah, okay.
You never stop, right?
Yep.
I am like a little kid. Like, holy crap, this is awesome. It's beautiful. I open it up. I'm looking inside, right? And he's got shelving and and it's a work van. It's a work,
Yeah.
it's got machines in there. You know the deal.
Hmm.
And so one of our other buddies, he comes up behind. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, Pete's new van. This is unbelievable. I want to go out and sand a floor with him. This is
Hmm.
And Billy looks at us and he goes, I will never get you floor guys at all. He goes, you're getting all jacked up over a dirty old work van. And I'm like, yeah, it's a dirty old work van to you. I go, but look, this is beautiful. Look,
Yeah, absolutely.
he's got cords hanging, shelves up. I go,
Yeah.
look, he's got a first aid kit, fire extinguisher. I go,
Wow.
this is,
What is he, some kind of sissy?
yeah, exactly. But he goes, I will never get you floor guys.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
I
It's
don't
true
even know
though.
why I told that story, but I was just cracking up. Like,
Yeah.
I even came home telling Pauline, "Oh, you should see Pete's new truck. It's got
Yeah.
shelves. It's got this,
Yep.
that."
Yep. I'll say to this day, the cleanest, most organized van I've ever been in my life has belonged to Aaron Sheaves.
No kidding.
Yeah. But I've seen some nice vans, but put together, clean, organized. I got to give it to Aaron on that one.
He
Yep.
was the guy who asked me to do the power scrubber video at the convention.
Oh, no kidding. Well, that
Yeah.
tracks. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. He's good. So cool. All right. Well, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. And again, I'm going to throw it out there again. I have a contract. If anybody wants it, they just got to email me. I'll send you a copy of it that talks about RH and the customer's responsibilities, this, that, and the other.
And I've got
Um,
a pretty good tomato sauce recipe and meatball recipe. If you want it, just, let me know. I'll send that right out to you.
he ain't lying. It's especially when you tweaked it with the adding the sugar to it.
Adding a little
Uh,
sugar to take
yeah.
away the heartburn. That was the
Hmm.
key.
Wayne.highlander@bona.com, WAYNE.HIGHLANDER @bona.com. And hey, thanks for listening. We appreciate it, everybody. We have fun doing this once a week or so. So I appreciate everybody listening. On behalf of me and Rob, it's been another episode of On the Floor with Wayne and Rob. Please stay tuned for another episode.